Welcome to the Nature Connections webinar series from the Campbell Valley Nature House. And this is hosted by Pacific Parklands Foundation. Thank you all for joining us today. This is really awesome. This has been an experiment for us and we're really enjoying it. And I'm Jeff Roten and I'm with Metro Vancouver Regional Parks. So first of all, I'd like to start by acknowledging that the Nature House is on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish First Nations, and I wish to extend my appreciation for the opportunity to hold this webinar on their shared traditional territories. So for those of you who haven't been to the Nature House, it's in Campbell Valley Regional Park. That's in South Langley in Metro Vancouver. I know there's some people that aren't here actually, even in Metro Vancouver in the webinar today. So the webinar is currently housed in that beautiful heritage barn, that red heritage barn that you see in the photo there. And it has interactive displays for the whole family and exhibits for the whole family. So this webinar, as I said, is graciously hosted by Pacific Parklands Foundation, and their executive director, Janet Antonio, is here to say a few words. I'm going to spotlight you.
I'm just going to talk then, Jeff, and if you get me up on screen, that's great. And if you don't, well, I'm sure,
okay.
I don't think people are missing that much. Hello, welcome everyone, and thank you for being here today. And again, thank you to Jeff and the Campbell Valley Nature House for inviting us to host this. The purpose of the foundation, we're 20 years old, and our goal is to connect people with nature and protect Metro Vancouver Regional Parks. Obviously, in COVID, parks have turned out to be such an important place for all of us. And some of the parks have seen up to 200% increase in attendance. So the ability to bring people to nature and to have this chance to connect with everyone without taking any risks is a wonderful thing. And so I want to thank Jeff and all of the people who've come here, and of course Ross for presenting as well. So thank you.
I'm really excited today to introduce Ross Davies. He's the program coordinator of Kanaka Education and Environmental Partnership Society, otherwise known as KEEPS. His camera person today is his lovely wife, Janice Jarvis, who works at Metro Vancouver. And Ross is going to talk all about pond life. So welcome, Ross.
And thank you, Jeff. Well, mayflies dancing on the surface as they lay their eggs. A little June snow cottonwood on this 21-degree afternoon. Welcome to the Stewardship Center. Ross Davies with you. And we'll take you through a little bit about this site. We're going to do some water chemistry testing. And then we're going to go do some pond dipping and see what kind of things are living in this pond behind me. And there'll be a little surprise a little later on in the afternoon. So the Kanaka Creek Watershed Stewardship Center came to be as a big fundraising Vancouver, KEEPS, Pacific Parklands Foundations, and a few others as well, the City of Maple Ridge. It's an educational facility, been here since 2016. And this habitat is our big outdoor classroom that was made for students. It's a pleasure to be hosting you this afternoon. The programming is something we do a lot, and I've really missed it this year. So to have a captive audience is great. So get your popcorn ready, and we'll start to rock and roll. Now, this water here that you see behind me, hopefully, and just keep in mind, there could be the odd glitch. This is all new to us, and we've been saying that so many times during this cold spring, haven't we? It comes off in a large part from the roof of the center, and it goes through a series of rock drains, and it actually treats the water so that our building has 0% effective impervious. There's no impact on the groundwater. Something to keep in mind. So I think I'm going to jump into the water chemistry. I have a thermometer that's sitting in the creek over here. I mentioned it's 21 in the air right now in the shade. And when you take a water temperature, you want to have your thermometer sitting in the pond or the creek, whatever the case, for a couple of minutes. So we'll just kind of grab it. Okay, we're sitting in the pond right now at 18 degrees. So if you've ever been through one of my programs, you will know that a salmon can tolerate 0 Celsius in the winter, up to about 20, 21 in the afternoon. That's about it. You know, the rule is if you're swimming in a lake or a stream and you aren't feeling like you have to get out and warm up every now and then, chances are pretty good it's too warm for salmon. So 18 is kind of pushing things for salmon. Just a little anecdote. I was here doing this with a virtual program on Wednesday this week, and the creek was running at 12. So there's a little difference in habitat. Another measurement we do is known as pH. Now, what you got here is a logarithmic scale. You can look that up. It goes from 0 to 14. And 0 to 7 is acidic. The lower the number, the higher the level of acidity. So like you can think of vinegar, fish and chips at White Rock. Now let's see how long it takes you to get that vision out of your head. That's pH 3. It's very acidic. Cement powder, we've tried this with our students, is about 12. Okay, so you need it between about 6 and 8 for salmon to tolerate things. Lower or higher than that, start running into trouble. Of course, your bottled water is about pH 7. It's right smack in the middle. It's neutral. Now, again, as Jeff was saying, if there's something that's really burning and really have a question, just fire away, because your little questions will probably make me remember things that I might otherwise have missed. No one wants to hear me drone on for half an hour straight. So there's a lot of ways you can do this. I'm not a fan of pH paper, simply because it can be affected by humidity. We were talking about that on the way here. And it reacts to the oils in your skin. If you touch it, you're going to get a wonky reading. This kit is from Lamont. You can get them through Dynamic Aqua Supply in Surrey. You can look on their website. Dean Trombley is a great guy, known him for a million years. And you have a little kit here. And all we're going to do, take out the tube. I brought some pond water up here in this white bucket. And I want to fill this thing up to about the 10 milliliter line. Usually takes a few, there we go. So that's about right there on my fingernail, as you can see that. If this was being videoed, it's going to be on, wait for it, YouTube. Next step is a little bottle of basically iodine. It's called pH wide range indicator. And we don't drink it. I'm going to put in 10 drops. That's an attention getter. Okay. So all we have to do is shake vigorously. If a major earthquake should strike at this very moment, you may skip this step. The water's going to change color. Kind of looks like Mountain Dew. And that's where this little contraption comes in. We're going to put that in the slot and hold it up to the sky, away from the sun. And that pH level is just a shade below 7. So based on temperature and based on pH, this pond could support salmon right now. So Jeff, I wonder if you want to get into the first poll question about water chemistry right now.
So again, the limiting factor in this pond for rearing salmon is turbidity, high water temperatures, or dissolved oxygen. So, it's interesting. So 14%, 2 people said turbidity, and then it was split between high water temperatures and oxygen. So evenly split in that answer there.
Yeah, we kind of needed the music from Jeopardy when that was going on, didn't we? Okay, so here's the thing. First, we'll explain turbidity and what that means. It's a measurement of how much light can go through water. So you can imagine if you've got 2 glasses of water, one's clear, the other is full of mud, the one that has more turbidity is the muddy one. So if you're a salmon, the implications is that you feed by sight. You don't go along the bottom like a sturgeon or a catfish using your touch and your smell. You have to be able to see your food or nothing's happening. So that turbidity affects your ability to eat. And it also impacts the gills. It can plug them up and cause all sorts of problems. And then in the fall time, the creek's been muddy, it cements the gravel together and you can kind of forget about spawning. So there's turbidity meters all over the place. You can get into the thousands of dollars, but we usually just assess if it's there or not. So what I would suggest to groups is if your creek is muddy, just take a photo and send it along to the authorities and grab a water sample and keep that on hand as well. It's really simple. So oxygen in this pond here, whoever voted for that, you're probably correct. I don't think this would get much warmer than 18, warmer than the creek, but it does get a little bit of creek flow diverted through here most of the year. But the water really isn't moving. And what can happen when you get a pond like this, and there's a lot of plant material, is you can really get a spike in oxygen levels. You don't want that. So this is probably okay for salmon in the winter, fall, and the spring, but by summer it's a bit of a limitation. And this brings me into some of the habitat diversity that we've got here. Sure, maybe this is off limits for salmon in the summer, but there's tree frogs living here. You won't find them out in the main part of the creek. Life out there is a little too quick for them. So your healthiest watersheds have different kinds of habitats, and on this site we've achieved precisely that. Okay, so again, based on what we tested today, we didn't test oxygen, but let's assume we did and it was okay. This would support salmon today. So the thing we want to get into next is kind of the fun part. It'll make you really fond of the pond. And we're going to go catching insects. Who doesn't love doing that? So what we do here on the site, and we do this a lot with classes, we have these little cups like so, and we're going to do exactly what the term suggests. So Janice will kind of follow me to the edge of the pond. Just reaching out from the edge, take a little dip, not dip, and we're going to see what we caught. I cheated and got some stuff earlier. And hopefully you can see that. I'll describe it just in case you can't. I have a diving beetle in here, and we'll get this guy to move. You've got a mayfly larva. I mentioned earlier the mayflies were dancing, laying their eggs. That's the adults. They emerge from the creek this time of year, right through summer. They live about an hour or less. They don't even feed. Just long enough to lay eggs on the surface. Eggs sink to the bottom, hatch, make a bunch of these larvae that live for a few months. They emerge, and the whole thing starts over again. You know, some folks, you go to the fishing lakes around Kamloops, Merritt, they talk about a mayfly hatch. What that is actually an emergence of the adults, millions at a time. And of course, the trout are going insane trying to capture them. So that's what that really means. Let's see what else we have here. Oh, we got a tree. Right down there, I'll just kind of poke them to make a move, is a Pacific chorus frog tadpole. Really happy to have them in here. It was going to be sort of problematic to share a video of that during our session here this afternoon. So instead, what I could direct you to, if you go to our website, www.keeps.org, and you scroll around to the bottom, there's a video called Spring Songs, where I came down here with this little guy one evening after a board meeting, and we recorded that ribbit. And now your Pacific chorus frogs, and if you want to call Pacific tree frogs, that's okay. It's only the males that croak. You identify the male by the black on his throat. The female has a white throat. She doesn't croak. But that ribbit sound is the one used for night scenes in Hollywood. So our Pacific chorus frog, I'm pretty sure he's got his own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame down wherever that is. Okay, so let's see what this all means. Here is the invertebrate chart. Where my hands are, the critters along the top row are all circled in green. And what that means is one's in these categories, and there's our mayfly, and you can see the chorus frog. That's the female, she's got a white throat. They're not tolerant of pollution. If we had a lot of problems with this water chemistry here, we wouldn't be seeing them. You get down to the middle, there's a diving beetle in there, there's a water boatman, things like that. They're kind of half and half. They can take a little bit of stress in the water. Down on the bottom are critters that could almost survive in a porta potty. And you've got mosquito larvae, leeches, things like that. Planarian. Now, if all you find are what's on the bottom row, you could have something limiting in your water. Okay. So if I want to figure out stream health, the fastest way to do it, I've got something in my throat here that's floating around in the air, is you want to test the insects. And we're going to kind of tie the last two parts together. So if someone says, Ross, go check this creek out, see if it's good for salmon. Yeah, I'll take the temperature and I'll take the pH, and I might measure the oxygen if I don't know this creek that well. chances are pretty good if you've got flowing water going over rocks, areas we call riffles, you know, shallow, flat, and bumpy, and you've got a lot of bubbles in the water, you've probably got good oxygen levels. The time you might not is maybe in here, or when your water's coming straight from groundwater, where it hasn't really had a chance to pick up oxygen yet. But that'll give me the stream health in real time. But what if somebody drained the swimming pool last night and that nasty chlorinated water came through overnight, and by the time we're here, it's gotten the heck out of Dodge? How would we know it even happened? That's where the insects come in. If we've got mayflies, forest frogs, it tells us that the creek is not only healthy now, but it has been for quite some time. So it's usually best to combine those two methods for determining stream health over the long haul and the short term as well. That's been a lot of talking. I wonder if there's any questions that have come up so far.
No questions so far. I think everybody's just listening intently, but I mean, do you want to stop for some questions?
No questions asked. You guys are easy to please. What I'm doing is a little treat I was talking about is I was up here yesterday and I set 2 minnow traps over near the pond. So they've been fishing all night. I have no idea what's in them. So I'm going to have to go off screen for about 1 minute and 48 seconds so that I can go over there and retrieve what's there and bring them back here.
Should I do the next poll maybe about the, should I do the next poll?
Well, the co yeah, before I show you what we got, here is what we call a G minnow trap. And the way it works, it's got 2 halves. This stuff in here is the bait, and that's just salmon rope. It's the bait we use, bait of choice. Now, some people use cat food, but I'm not trying to catch cat, I want to catch fish. So if you want to catch a fish, you want to use something that smells like one. So you've got 2 ends of this thing, with holes in each end, and they work on the principle that fish are basically stupid. So they smell the bait, swim on inside, and before we deploy them, we just clip it together like so, and chuck it in the water, and come back the next morning. A couple things here, a couple considerations. You can't just go and kind of do this. You actually need a permit from Fisheries and Oceans Canada. If you do it without one, you could get in a little bit of a jackpot. Secondly, it's probably wisest to do this without an audience. I've had it happen once where I came back the next morning and a bunch of kids that were in the area, I figured they probably saw me do it, and they brought fish home to the aquarium, and we all know how that ends. There's a third thing too. The pond I just took these out of is kind of a controlled area, right? It comes out of the hatchery. It doesn't really get any big changes of flow, but if you set these out in a creek and a big rainstorm comes along and one of these gets away, it's going to be bad. This thing will, the fish inside the trap will eventually die, and in doing so, that'll reset the trap, and the process could go on for years. So if you've got to really watch the weather, and if an unscheduled rainstorm comes rolling in, back you go to the creek to pull them before that happens. And I've also had bears mess with it too, so it's actually a fourth thing. But I'm kind of digress. First things first, open the bucket. We have what we call a coastal cutthroat trout. I'm giving him a little shot of oxygen there. And we're going to take him off screen and put him back in the creek right now. It's a little too warm for him out here. I'll be another 1 minute, 37 seconds.
We never answered the last poll, the question, so I'm going to ask Simon, who should know and who's here today, to what's the answer to the how long do coho salmon live? If you could type in the chat box. It was all the above. Okay, so they live 2 to 4 years. All the above. Okay, thanks. And Sadie actually had a question, Ross. When you had your chart, she said, what was the red animal at the bottom of the chart?
There was one called a water mite, and that's really magnified. You wouldn't even see those in real time. They're so small.
Okay, thanks, Ross.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to address the poll question here, I get asked that a lot, is how long do these fish live? We have basically 5 species of Pacific salmon, 6 if you want to count steelhead. Every single one of them is different, and they actually differ among themselves. So most coho, I would say 70–80% of them, will return to spawn at age 3. They'll be a fry, live in fresh water for a year. They'll leave a year and a half old as smolts, usually, spend the ocean in the winter, and come back as age 3. But sometimes they go out to the ocean and they outcompete their cousins and siblings. They get to be 30 centimeters long and think, you know what, I'm big enough to come back and spawn now. So that's known as a jack, predominantly males. It's possible to get female jacks, they're known as gills, that come back at age 2, and they spawn right alongside the big guys. Or occasionally, their growth will be too slow, either in the freshwater or in the ocean, and you'll get a 4-year-old coho, either one that didn't go out to sea until it was 2 instead of 1, or one that didn't feel comfortable going back, not a lot of upwelling in the ocean. That brings the food. So the fish stayed out an extra ocean year and came back at age 4. So a curious thing, I'm just gonna, a little bit of a history lesson. In 1992, we had one of those big El Nino years. And what happened that year is that the coho coming in were really small and skinny. And I'm going to throw a fancy word at you. That's called fecundity. And all that means is how much eggs are in a female. Most times, the coho is going to have about 2,500 eggs. These little skinny things had maybe 800–900. And it looked like they were starving to death, because essentially they were. And then about mid-November, everything did a 180. We started seeing these huge coho coming in that were about this big. And we thought, those are 4-year-olds. Well, we took the samples from their scales, which put on rings like a tree. Under a microscope, you can tell the age of the fish. They were 3-year-olds too. So what happened, talking to the chief biologist at the Salmon Commission, was this, is a bunch of subtropical bait fish came north with El Nino, the warm water, and some of these later time coho thought, hey guys, we can eat these things. So they stayed out, put on a bunch of weight, and came back huge. So it's really interesting how it all kind of fits together. The cutthroat trout that I just had, he lives here his whole life. Kanaka Creek has a population of resident cutthroat that are probably genetically separate from everybody else, because about 2 kilometers down from where we're standing, Cliff Falls is in the way. No salmon or trout has ever made it up here to the Belle Living Hatchery, which is part of our site, on his or her own. They arrive in a transport truck full of water on the back of a pickup truck and all things. Of course, going the other way is no problem. Over the falls they go, like a water slide. So the resident cutthroats are here their whole life, and they can live to be 5, 6, 7 years old. They will never get bigger than about this long, about 25 centimeters, simply because far less food to be had in this environment than there is out in the ocean. Further down, we have our anadromous, and all that means is sea-run cutthroat that go to the ocean, just like the salmon do, and get to be a little bigger, maybe 35, 40 centimeters, maybe even bigger than that. And the difference being is they spawn in the spring, whereas we know Pacific salmon spawn in the fall time, right? In the fall time. Now, I just want to mention something about, I know all of you have run into this at some point, invasive species. And we have, in our landscaping around here, we're fighting invasive buttercup all the time. And in this watershed, one of our biggest challenges is invasive plants that are from Europe or something that have gotten over here, have no natural enemies, and they've gone crazy. Well, we've got some in the pond here too. There are at least 2 American bullfrogs.
Oh, Ross, do you want to launch? We have that last poll about native species. Should I launch that now?
I was thinking precisely that. Let's fire away with that.
All right. Okay, so here's the next poll. So which one of these is a native species? And you can vote now: brown bullhead catfish, bullfrog, black crappie, or northern pike minnow. So which one is an invasive species? Is a native species, I should say. Sorry, a native species, not invasive. Which one is? So most of the people thought it was the northern pike minnow, and the other one was the brown bullhead catfish, and then bullfrog and black crappie were both fairly low, but northern pike minnow was definitely, half the people thought it was the northern pike minnow.
Okay, yeah, if you chose the crappie, that'd be a crappy answer. Just a little bit about all those species. Of course, black crappie is a member of the sunfish family, and they were brought here from somebody back east who was homesick, as were pumpkin seeds. And we also have both largemouth and smallmouth bass. There's largemouth bass in lower Kanaka, but the fortunate thing is they can't really catch smaller salmon. They're just too slow. And since they're warm water fish, they have a lot of trouble penetrating too far upstream. So the main problem with them is they sometimes compete for the same food resources. So your black crappie, they're pretty accomplished predators. They make good little panfish, and they like slow water. They'd probably be able to live in here, but we're not going to have crappies in here. Now, brown bullhead catfish, interesting story there, is they're not native to BC either. Some people think they are. Here is kind of what happened. They were originally brought in from back east to be on display at an aquarium in a restaurant in Victoria, BC. And a few of these fish were given to a man by the name of Levy, who tried to keep them in an aquarium. Now, this is going back like 1910 or something like that. You could look it up. He got sick and tired. They were kind of eating them out of house and home, because I've experienced that myself. So he chucked them out of a window of a train into Elk Lake on the island. And it was just off to the races after that. And somehow a bunch of these found their way into lower mainland. They went from Hansett Lake. Now they're kind of all over the place. So let's talk about the native one, northern pike minnow. That is the largest member of the Cyprinidae family, which means minnows. That's actually a minnow, but it's a very predatory minnow. It used to be called northern squawfish, and we don't like that. So it's called a pike minnow, and they can literally, I caught one as a kid in Shuswap Lake that was this big and weighed about 10 kilograms. They can get pretty large, but in the Fraser, most of the ones you see get to be about that size. They're a fish eater. Even pike minnow that long have been known to eat smaller fish. So the one we have right on our pond, and I saw one earlier, is the American bullfrog. And the way that started is the bullfrogs are native to back east, right? They're Ontario, all the way down into the southern states. And they make a couple of really unusual noises. They make it sound like, oh, oh, oh. And then there's a, you've all heard that. And when they jump into the water, they make it sound like, almost like a cat. So they're really bad news. We've got two of them in here. We try to keep them at bay as best we can. Fortunately, they haven't taken over the whole thing. Where we are now, we're a little higher in elevation, a little cooler climate than the rest of Maple Ridge. So I think they're kind of almost on the edge of the range here. So we never seem to have more than maybe two. An interesting story. Now you've got me going. We were at a campsite in Saskatchewan, of all places. Janice, you'll remember this one. And my cell phone rings, and it's an old granny who lives on Lower Kanaka who was asking about an easy way to get bullfrogs out of her pond. So I started to explain about if you could drain the pond in the fall. Native frogs have gone to do the terrestrial gig, meaning land, by that time, so you should be able to do it that way. And I said, well, what are you doing now? And she goes, oh, I shoot them. And I'm trying not to laugh. Well, how do you shoot them? Oh, I sit on the porch and pick them off with my 22. So right away, I've got this vision of Granny from the Beverly Hillbillies. So don't try this at home. So yeah, invasive like bullfrogs, and the key is to, if they're in a place, they should stay there. There's all kinds of stories, kids taking the tadpoles home, they get tired of them, let them go somewhere else, and then away they go. It's like Pandora's box, like you wouldn't believe. I think we could probably get around to opening up for questions now. Sorry.
Hey, folks. Yeah, you see the Q&A box at the bottom if you want to type some questions in. If you have any questions for Ross, this is your opportunity. I'm not seeing any questions yet.
While we're waiting for questions, I should go over some of the equipment maybe for the pond dipping. And it's really easy to get a hold of. These are just wonton soup containers. One of our interps is crazy about wontons, so we've accumulated a collection of these. They're quite friendly on the environment. And we've got a lot of little things like this too. These are just little magnifiers. The kids really like them. They're kind of cool. You can see things like the gills on the mayfly. Mayflies have the gills on the abdomen. Your stoneflies have them in their armpits. That's why stoneflies do push-ups on the bottom of your little viewing thing. And a lot of this stuff is simply from the dollar store or little pet shops that have things like that. So you don't have to break the bank. That's for sure.
Ross, we have one question
Sure.
so far. Are there any salamanders in the pond?
Excellent question. I'm glad you asked that. Yes, we do. We have observed northwestern salamanders in here. And they're one of the larger species. They can get to be about that long. And usually they're more like about this. They're kind of brownish color, and they're really cool. So I'm going to give you a little trivia. Now, this is what I meant, where I love the question because it kind of reminds me of things. The most toxic amphibian in North America lives here. And that is known as the rough-skinned newt. They're about this long. They have a brilliant orange color on their belly, which is probably a warning. They're kind of brownish on the back. If you eat one, you will die. They're that toxic. So when you see one crossing a road, and a good place would be in the Golden Ears Park, in around April and again in the fall, and that's when they migrate to and from the breeding areas. They don't really try to escape because they know they don't really need to. Every now and then, you'll find something like a young raccoon that's eaten a newt and died. Now, an interesting thing, you know, right before we started this webinar this afternoon, there was a female common garter snake right over there, and I'm hoping she catches the bullfrog. And there's an interesting evolutionary arms race going on where common garter snakes, and they have a mild neurotoxic venom in their saliva. But it's not for us. It's for when they grab a frog, it paralyzes the frog and it makes it easier to swallow. So they are venomous. They also have developed an immunity to newt venom. Even though if one eats a newt, it'll act like it's drunk for a little while. So in places where you've got resistant garter snakes, the newts are more toxic and the garter snakes get more resistant. So these two are kind of duking it out.
Ross, I have a question here. Someone from Sadie who says, we have a small pond that dries up in summer. Should we do anything to help make it a better habitat? What type of conditions are bad for tadpoles to survive? We worry about ours.
Okay, Sadie, I'm assuming you're talking Pacific tree frog, Pacific chorus frog tadpoles. If your pond has water in it till probably August or so, you're probably okay, because by that time a lot of the tadpoles will have grown their back legs and they've left. They've gone off into the woods. So it's probably not a big deal. In fact, chorus frogs oftentimes are in ponds that are completely dry by fall time.
Another question here. Well, actually, so Simon's asking about posting high-res videos of invertebrates on the Keeps YouTube page, and how do you find the YouTube page?
Okay, that's a good question. You know, we just talked about this at our meeting Thursday night. I think what I'm probably going to do to help everybody out with that is just post a link to that YouTube channel and highlight it on the website. That would be the easiest. So that's a homework assignment for me that I really need to do.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm going to post the link to the website at the end of this. It's actually it's actually pretty simple. I'll let you know now. The Keeps website is just www.keeps.org. www.keeps.org. So I have another question here. Can you get rid of invasive plants around the pond?
Oh, yes. We encourage you to do that. Any invasive plants. And, you know, when you're pulling out invasives, getting rid of invasives, a good example might be Himalayan blackberry, but I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. But if you want to take it on, it's really important to come in afterwards with native plants that'll be aggressive. Like, for example, you take out blackberry, you like to bring in salmonberry. It's invasive as well, but it's native. It just won't take off like Pandora's box and keep on going.
I have another good question here. Yeah, do other animals, non-aquatic, depend on the pond? I think that's an interesting question.
You know what? Everything starts with water, doesn't it? So many animals depend on the pond. You've got so many food chains starting up here. It's just incredible. So you get rid of the pond, there's a lot of species are going to be in a lick of trouble. You've got things, I could just go on forever. Our garter snake we talked about, raccoons, different kind of birds, fish-eating ducks, the mergansers. The pond is the grocery store.
Does anybody have any other questions at this point? We still have quite a bit of time left here. Do you have anything else to share with us, Ross?
Yeah, just, you know.
Do you want me to share any of those photos?
You know, that'd be a good time to do that, sure.
Okay, let's see if I can. So what should I show first?
Well, I believe, we had a chorus frog tadpole from before.
Okay, so okay. Let's see which one. So that is, oh, where is it? Oh, it's here. So this is one. Hopefully this is on the screen now. There we go. So that's just the single one that I'm showing right now?
Yes, that's a single chorus frog tadpole.
Yeah, yeah. Anything to say about that?
Yeah, the tree frogs are one of the earliest in the spring to spawn. The only ones really ahead of them are red-legged frogs, and where they're found is northern Oregon spotted frogs too. But tree frogs, you can have them spawning as early as the end of February in a mild winter. So like we answered the one question before, these tadpoles are ready to roll as early as July and definitely before the end of August.
Okay, and there's an interesting question that's come up here. What can you look for to help ID these tadpoles?
Well, mainly looking at our chorus frog tadpole, its size. They are the smallest tadpole that you're going to find. And other tadpoles that you might find, like on the red-legged frog, they're going to be kind of one size bigger. They're probably about 2 centimeters long. So anything in the summer that's smaller than about a centimeter, it's going to be a chorus frog.
Okay, and I do have that that other photo that I can try showing of the, I guess there's multiple ones here. Let me see if I can find it, which is this photo here, which was popping up, and that's them. They're much smaller there, and that's again that's also the Pacific chorus frog tadpoles, correct?
Actual size, so you see how small they really are when they first hatch. And that one was shot here pretty recently. Again, our pond is a bit later time because it's a little higher and a little colder.
Okay, and we have a question here, a couple of questions coming up, and one is, will you find tadpoles in July, or is that too late in the season?
Definitely find tadpoles in July, absolutely.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing this. There we go. We're back to you on the screen. Okay. Any other, I've got some other photos here. Do we want to share any of the other ones?
You know, we didn't catch a stonefly today, so the one of the stonefly would be a good thing to show.
So let's see, I'll find the adult one here. I think this is hopefully this is correct. That's the adult stonefly, yes?
That is an adult stonefly, yeah. And they have a similar life cycle to the mayfly. And the stoneflies and mayflies, the difference in the water with the larva is mayflies are fast. They can swim really quickly. Stoneflies prefer to crawl. And on land, it's the same thing. Mayflies are very agile. They're very quick. They do that up and down dance over the river, those big swirls you'll see on spring and summer afternoons. That is the biggest wedding on Earth going on, where females are circling, males coming up through the middle, and you know what's going on. When a stonefly emerges, he keeps this lazy attitude into adulthood. He doesn't fly very far, and they often land on you as if you were a tree.
So Selena has a question. I think it's maybe, what do they eat as adults, or do they eat as adults? I don't know. I guess she's referring to the stonefly, yeah.
The stonefly as adults, they do feed a little bit, as far as I know, and they're mostly kind of vegetarians, but as larvae, stoneflies, they can be a predator as well. So it's mostly aquatic detritus and vegetation that they eat when they're larvae.
Okay, and I do have another question here from Reagan, who's 4 years old, wants to know how many types of fish live in the pond and how many colors.
You know what, Reagan? It's so cool, isn't it? There's so many different colors. We saw our cutthroat. He's got orange. He's got silver. He's got a bit of red. He's got black spots. He's got a bit of yellow tinge on his fins. And as far as how many different fish are in this pond, I've seen cold salmon in here. I've seen cutthroat in here. That's two. And I'm thinking there's a little type of minnow that lives here called a dace that sometimes comes into the pond too. So I'll be guessing three. But you know what, Reagan? I'm still learning myself, so it wouldn't surprise me to find almost anything in here. But no sharks.
Okay, and another question that's just come in: do you find stoneflies everywhere, or just around ponds? That's a good
Yeah, I
question.
love the question, and that's a really good one.
Yeah.
We hardly ever find stoneflies in the pond, and that particular one is called the giant stonefly species. They are about this big. They're really big, and people sometimes are frightened because they have two tails on them, and they think they're stingers. They're not. They're completely harmless. Where we do find stoneflies is in fast water. They can hang on to rocks and waterfalls. They have little claws on their feet. So they need a lot of oxygen and they need fast water. So basically speaking, you don't have to go 85 on the dirt road to see a stonefly.
Okay, any other questions at this point, or anything else, Ross, that you want to share with us?
Well, if we got the photo of the stonefly larva, that'd be kind of cool to look at.
Okay, let me see if I can find him there. This is, okay, here we go.
Yeah,
Up
there's else I was talking about. He's missing part of one. He probably had to go with a crayfish or who knows, whatever. But that's kind of what the larva looks like. And the gills, again, are in the armpits. With the mayfly, you would see them on the abdomen. That's the difference.
I have another question that's come up. Are there any plants around the pond that are edible? I guess it depends on your pond.
Yeah, there's a number of edible plants around the pond. And I don't know if we can point the camera down, Janice. See, this is, we have deer around here, and they've been thoroughly enjoying the ravens. But as far as edible plants for people, yes, we do have them. It's not really our thing to encourage that. We don't want people eating plants in the park because we can go now, phase two, we can go to McDonald's again. But the animals that live here, this is the only game in town. But there are a number of traditional edible plants that Indigenous have used since the beginning of time, basically. And we do have some around the pond too.
So Ross, I'm just going to make a comment right now that you have your camera around your neck, and Ross takes like a lot of amazing photos of wildlife, and a lot of those are on your website, correct? On the Keep's website?
Yeah, I always carry a camera because so many times when you see something, the camera's in the truck or something, so I keep it with me all the time.
Yeah, and it's quite opportunistic. It just seems you're always finding something to, like, your photos are amazing. Of course, you've got a good camera and you're a photographer, but I just thought I wanted to make a note of that it's something that I don't do, that when I'm walking in nature, just to always have a camera ready, like even my phone ready to get, a photo of something when you're in nature.
Yeah, to the website too, there's Keeps also has a Facebook group and a Facebook page, and there's probably even more photos on there than there are on the website. So that's another thing to check out as well.
Okay.
One thing about that, not going into a photography session, but this has got a really powerful zoom lens on it. I can take something that's 200 meters away and make it look like it's next door, if not closer. So when taking photos of wildlife, your zoom lens is your best friend. You can be there without the wildlife detecting you, and then you won't disturb it. You won't disrupt whatever he or she's doing.
I do have a question here. Can you get rid of invasive plants around the pond? Oh, it's already been answered. Sorry, never mind. Yeah. Sorry about that. I got a little confused. Okay.
Came back already.
Yeah. Or did we answer that question? Did you talk about that? Can you get rid of invasive plants around the pond? Did I?
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
We did. Sorry about that. Okay. Anything else as we start wrapping things up? I'm just noticing that it's just a few minutes before 2, but there's some time for some final questions here. If anybody questions or comments, I'm going to post. Let's see if I can do this. Oh, here we go. What is the tube-like thing that is on the chorus frog tadpole that was in that photo?
I don't think that was on the tadpole. I think that was just something that was floating around on the dish at the time. They don't have any kind of tubes on them at all.
Okay. And again, somebody was asking, have you seen bald eagles eat fish from the pond?
We haven't seen eagles in this pond, but we do have them along Kanaka Creek, especially lower down. And yes, they're going after fish mostly probably after the salmon have done. From late November onwards, it's the best time to see eagles. Although they're here any time of the year. And of course, they can live to something like 30 years old. So they're pretty cool to have around.
Great. Okay. Any final questions? And then maybe we'll start wrapping this up. Oh, here we go. How many different types of frogs can we find around the pond? This is a question from Brendan.
Okay, we're going to pick them off one by one. We know about the Pacific chorus frog. We know we got Mr. Bullfrog. We have recorded red-legged frogs here. There's a fourth one too that's not in the pond, but it's in the creek, and that's called the tailed frog. And you won't find them in slow water like this. In fast water, they like it fast, or like a stonefly kind of that way. And number 5 is not a frog, but we have northwestern toads. Green frog?
And that's
now, if you hear about green frogs, we don't know for sure if we have them or not, but we probably do. They're an invasive non-native frog as well. Sort of think of them as a smaller version of the American bullfrog, but kind of the same thing. They're gluttons. They eat everything smaller than themselves, including each other. They're actually disgusting.
Okay, thanks. Just this final panel here, which has the websites. So first of all, I want to thank Ross for an amazing session, and also Janice for your camera work. Yeah, this is something that we're trying for the first time, so I know the image was a little bit shaky at times, but we're just learning as we go along. So first of all, if you want to get more information about Pacific Parklands Foundation, you know, there's the website there, Metro Vancouver. If you want to find out about our parks, just go to metrovancouver.org, and in the search engine you can type in even about the Nature House. And then finally, for Keeps, there it is, www.keeps.org. So check out Ross's videos, which he's going to at some point provide a link for, and see some of his great photos and find out more about this organization that does incredible work in Kanaka Creek Regional Park. So again, thank you everybody for attending. Do you have any last words, Ross?
Well, it was a pleasure to be on here today. It's the thing I love most about the job is to connect you with nature and share what I'm seeing. It's a labor of love. So I thank you.
So again, thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed yourselves and enjoy the rest of the day. And hopefully there's sunshine wherever you are. So take care, everyone. And yeah, that's it for us. Thank you very much. Have a great day.